Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Jessica O'Brien, and I am the Workforce Strategy Consultant in Southeast Minnesota. Our Workforce Strategy Consultant team is excited to be hosting this conversation today on engaging with our second chance workforce. This is part of our workforce networking series that focuses on sharing best practices and workforce strategies across the state. Our events occur on the first Wednesday of every month from 11 a.m. to noon, followed by our unplugged Q&A session from 12 to 12:30, in which attendees can unmute and ask questions. Our panelists can share additional information, and we can engage in a deeper discussion. Our workforce strategy consultant team works with businesses on a regional basis throughout the state, focusing on talent attraction and retention strategies in targeted industries. So during today's event, we welcome you to also share your own successful talent attraction and retention strategies as well. After today's webinar, the PowerPoint presentation, along with resources and a short survey, will be sent out to all of the attendees, and a recording will be available on the Workforce Wednesday Career Force website. So with that, I want to welcome you to today's event focused on engaging with our second chance workforce. And to get us started, I will turn things over to my colleague, Adeshewa, who will be our facilitator today.
Thank you, Jess. Good morning, everyone. My name is Adeshewa Adeseji. I am the Workforce Strategy Consultant for the Twin Cities metro area, and I am very excited to be facilitating today's webinar, including a panel discussion with a variety of panelists with years of experience. So if we can go to the third slide, we'll go over the agenda. So for today's session, I'll start off with just a little fun fact. We'll talk a little bit about myths and biases, provide some data, talk a little bit about programs that are currently operating, working to assist second chance workforce. And then we will have a very robust discussion with, as I mentioned, a very expanded panelists with a lot of experiences, and then we'll end with some resources. So next slide. So who are we talking about when we mention second chance workforce? So, according to the chamber, the U.S. Chamber, second chance workforce is defined as the practice of hiring individuals with a criminal record. So for this discussion, second chance workforce ranges from first time to repeat offenders. And the second chance hiring taps into a massive source of talent that many businesses can benefit from. So according to weareallcriminals.org, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to challenging today's perceptions of what it means to be a criminal, while 4 in 4 individuals have a criminal history, only 1 in 4 have a criminal background or record. A 2021 report from the Alliance for Safety and Justice estimates that 1 in 3 American adults, 78 million people, have a criminal record. The difference between someone with a criminal record and one without can be a result from multiple factors, such as zip codes and/or racial biases. Or maybe it's as simple as the difference between those who got caught and those who didn't. Next slide. We all know that there are myths and biases associated with individuals with criminal backgrounds. Unfortunately, these myths can and often lead to biases that affect an employer's willingness to hire a second chance job seeker. Above are some of the most common myths about hiring second chance job seekers that we have experienced from employers. So once a criminal, always a criminal. Hiring people with criminal records increase risk. People with criminal records are less reliable and will continue to increase turnover. Hiring people with criminal records will increase my expenses. Hiring people with criminal records will result in underperformance. Hiring people with criminal records will create problems on the job. There's a skills gap between people with criminal records and those without. People with criminal records are likely to commit crimes again. I can offer lower rate wages to people with criminal records because they have no other options. So these are some of the common myths and biases that we see when we talk to employers about recruiting from a second chance workforce. Next slide. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services reports that more than 600,000 people are released from state and federal prisons each year. At any moment, our country has roughly 7 million people on probation, parole, or supervision, or still in jail or prison. So according to the Minnesota Department of Corrections Adult Prison Population Summary, as of January 2022, approximately 7,511 adults are in the prison system. 94% or 95% of those are males, 5.7% are females. The average age of inmates are 39.3 years of age. The majority will identify as white, 52.1%, followed by African American at 35.9%. The highest education is a high school graduate at 29.7%. And in the 2021, 4,658 individuals were released or will be released. Next slide. Now, understanding the need for services, some organizations have taken the initiative and developed programs and partnerships aimed at preparing recently released and for some the first time back into the workforce. So here are a few examples of some of the organizations that are currently in this space doing things to work with our second chance workforce. We have Twin Cities Rise. They assist individuals in poverty on the path to long-term and stable employment. Their Empowerment Institute works across a wide range of organizations and boundaries, included but not limited to the second chance population. CareerForce.com, which is one of Minnesota's online platforms, offers workshops for offenders and or former offenders. The New Leaf workshops are designed specifically for job seekers seeking for job seekers addressing a criminal record in their job search process and or are having a difficult time obtaining employment due to their barriers and or records. Registration for these workshops are through minnesotaworks.net, which is the state of Minnesota's other job board platform. The Minnesota Department of Corrections is the state's law enforcement agency that operates Minnesota's prison system. The Minnesota Department of Corrections partners with organizations throughout the state that provides programs and services to incarcerated or recently released populations. Last but not least, Hennepin County Sheriff Office has a HOPE program that wants to break the cycle of incarceration by helping inmates create better opportunities for themselves. This program provides inmates with education and training classes while incarcerated to help them develop the skills they need to be successful once they return to their communities, including education opportunities, GED programs, life skill classes, financial literacy, and vocational training. I'm excited to have representation from 2 of these programs on today's panel. So change is coming. You know, right now, construction and manufacturing have been at the forefront of recruiting and hiring second chance workforce. However, we are starting to see more industries changing their perceptions and hesitations about looking to second chance talent. However, there's still a long way to go to getting more employers to recognize the second chance workforce as a reliable and valuable talent pool. An example is the Prison to Pipeline program. This is a collaboration between currently and formerly incarcerated leaders, law professors, the Minnesota Department of Corrections, Mitchell Hamlin Law School, North Hennepin Community College Paralegal Program, and 2 organizations, United We Are All Free and All Square. This program opens the door to ABA-approved paralegal degrees and ABA-accredited law degrees for currently incarcerated Minnesotans. The pipeline's first cohort is scheduled to commence in June and August, respectively. This program will facilitate the first ever currently incarcerated Juris Doctorate students who will be plugging into existing courses from Shakopee and Stillwater Correctional Facilities. So, like I said, as we see construction and manufacturing are the two industries that really have outreach and connected with the second chance workforce. But slowly, other industries are starting to recognize the importance of tapping into this talent pool as well. Next slide. For employers still a little hesitant and or on the fence when it comes to recruiting from second chance workforce, there are federal resources available to incentivize and support employers who are recruiting and hiring and looking into that talent pool for potential workers. So the Minnesota Federal Bonding Program was designed to reimburse the employers for any loss due to employee theft or money or property during the first 6 months of a selected individual's term of employment. The Work Opportunity Tax Credit is a federal tax credit available to employers who invest in American job seekers who have consistently faced barriers to employment. So we understand the importance of employers to maintain their brand, to maintain their reputation, and it is a gamble to reach out and connect with workers or potential workers from this population. And these are two of many resources out there available to help support those employers who are looking to hire from that talent pool. So with that, we will start with the panel discussion. Let me go ahead and do a quick introduction, and then I will let each of the panelists say a little bit about themselves. First, we have Jacqueline Carpenter, who is the Vice President of Workforce Development and the Empowerment Institute for Twin Cities Rise. Jacqueline, if you can give us a quick wave. Next, we have Jeremiah Carter, who is the Job Services Supervisor for the Minnesota Department of Employment and Economic Development, or DEED, and he works with the New Leaf program. Jeremiah, if you can give us a little wave. Next, we have Kurt Serpaniak, who is the President and CEO of Horizon Roofing, located in central Minnesota. Kurt, if you can give us a little wave. Next, we have Tracy Tapani, co-owner and co-president of Wyoming Machining. Tracy, you can give us a little wave as well. And I believe we have Russell Simmons, who is a diesel mechanic and part of the Second Chance workforce, currently employed at North Central Bus and Equipment, Inc. So I think he is on there. So with that, we can stop the presentation and go into the questions. So before I start, I want to say thank you again for taking time out of your busy schedules to be a part of this panel discussion. So I will just go ahead and start and say for each of our panelists, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, your organization, and also your thoughts on engaging with Second Chance Workforce, that would be great.
Okay, well, I'll break the ice, I guess. And I'm not sure if my video is just frozen on my end or not, or if other people are having it. But Kurt Spaniak with Horizon Roofing. We're a commercial roofing company located in Wade Park and New Hope, Minnesota. We do commercial roofing, so we're not talking about single-family homes. It's office buildings, retail centers, basically single-story to high-rises throughout the upper Midwest. And then we have our sheet metal department that does the decorative sheet metal work. Our service department that does fixing roof leaks, service on buildings, etc. Currently, I think about 110 to 120 employees, looking to hire another about 20 to 30 this year. We have worked with people that have came out of incarceration and just have records. I don't see any difference in like how they are compared to somebody that doesn't have a record. So I said earlier, we're all kind of criminals. When I've had stuff happen, I've had things stolen from people that don't have a record. So.
Right. And Jeremiah, we could go with you next. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Definitely. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeremiah Carter, Job Services Program Manager with Career Force, with DEED, specifically the Career Force Division. I oversee a number of programs within Career Force, one of the programs being our Migrant Seasonal Farm Worker Service, our federal foreign labor certification program as well, along with our federal bonding program that was just mentioned recently. We also have an interagency agreement with MnDOT providing highway heavy construction training. And then I oversee our special projects division, which focuses on special populations being those underserved or underrepresented, specifically the justice involved population. So I have 10 years of state experience. Those 10 years have been within DEED and the Department of Corrections. So thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you all today.
So, Tracy, if you'd like to go next.
Sure. Good morning, everybody. I'm Tracy Tapney. I own Wyoming Machine in Stacy, Minnesota with my sister Lori. She and I have owned this precision sheet metal fabrication company for over 25 years. Precision sheet metal fabrication, for those of you not familiar with it, is usually close tolerance metalworking. So we do things like cutting of sheet metal, laser cutting, punching of it, bending it, welding it to make completed assemblies. These are skilled jobs that pay well, have a lot of stability for people, and pay good wages. I can probably talk a little bit more about how I got involved with working with people that have backgrounds sometimes that are more difficult to employ. But generally speaking, I would tell you I have quite a number of people working in the plant, not necessarily through any intentional program at Wyoming Machine, but who do have criminal backgrounds of some sort. And I can talk more about that as we get going with the presentation and the discussion. Thank you.
Jacqueline?
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Jacqueline Carpenter, and I'm with the organization called Twin Cities Rise. We're a local nonprofit serving the 7-county metro area. We've been in operation for 28 years. I've spent about equal amount of time in workforce development, and I've always been very passionate about making sure everyone has a right and a chance to be employed. I really advocate for my whole career for this type of hiring adaption, and I was really thrilled to be a part of Twin Cities Rise the last 5 years, where we have made a significant impact with justice reform and hiring, fair chance hiring. We've done a lot of work in our career readiness program and our Empowerment Institute program to support corrections and to support reentry work. So we've been affiliated with the drug court systems and reentry systems. We've done a lot around justice reform. I hope I've met many of you during the kickoff of the Minnesota Fair Chance Hiring Guide, and I'm honored to be here today for something I'm really passionate about.
Thank you. And I believe we have Russ, who is under Jessica Goebbels. So you're still on mute, Russ. If you want to unmute yourself and tell us a little about yourself and just your quick experience as part of the Second Chance workforce.
Right.
You're on mute still. Yeah. Okay.
All right.
There you go.
There. Okay, I'm here. My name's Russ Simmons. I got hired on with North Central Bus and Equipment back in 2016. I've been here ever since. As a ex-inmate or an ex-offender, I had to find a job market that would allow me to be able to be used and utilized in the workforce. So I took the initiative myself and went back to school to become a mechanic. And I got hired on here. So it's been, it was a little tough at the beginning, but I was able to get through it.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you to the panelists. So let's go ahead and start with the first question. So for the employers, interested in engaging with Second Chance Workforce, how and where do they start? Once you knew you wanted to tap into this talent pool, what were your first steps? What do you recommend for employers that are a little hesitant and a little afraid to recruit from this pool of talent?
So for Horizon, one of the things I always started doing before the COVID stuff happened was reaching out to the not-for-profits that are working with them. like Rise, Hired, Goodwill, and because we still don't have like a direct pipeline to maybe where we should be going. We have done some mock interviews actually at Lino Lakes within the prison to try and start meeting some more people. But would like to find also some more pipelines as well too.
This is Tracy Tappaney, and I can speak to this question as well. For me, I would say this has been sort of, I don't know, a long journey for me of learning and understanding this particular population of people. And I think it started really when a former employee of mine left my company to go work in Department of Corrections and was running a training program for individuals who were serving time in the Department of Corrections. He asked me to join an employer or a business advisory council that he had set up to get input from businesses about, you know, what were trends in the industry, what kind of equipment was being used, what type of skills individuals receiving training needed to have. So that gave me a chance to go over to the prison a few times a year, get to go inside, tour the manufacturing facility, meet people that were working in the program. And I have to be honest with you that one of the things that really influenced me was, I think, the passion and the concern that people working in Department of Corrections have around training people to hopefully help them reenter society and, you know, move on to live productive lives in society and to be whole and healthy when they're outside of that particular system. Then after that, I also had an opportunity to be a graduation speaker, both at Stillwater, and I've done that at Moose Lake, which, you know, just to share with those of you who are listening, an odd experience for a female working in manufacturing to be the graduation speaker in men's prisons. But again, I had an opportunity to interact with people that had training, and I am a person who I don't like to just base my beliefs on what I hear from other people or what I see in the news. I would rather try to engage in a way where I can meet people and understand firsthand and form my own opinions. But kind of after having had some of those experiences, I have to say that within the four walls of my own company, it made me pay attention and be more aware of things that people that already worked for me had maybe dealt with in their past that I wasn't aware of. You know, and oftentimes as you get to know people and they start to trust you, they do share, and people started, you know, I don't know, sharing information about things they had done, time that they had spent in the Department of Corrections. And I realized that I had quite a few people already who kind of fit this profile of a person, but they were wonderful long-term employees who were contributing and really adding to the success of the company. So for me, that's kind of how I evolved into thinking differently about this and being more aware of it.
So it's just as an employer really taking the initiative, kind of stepping outside of those boundaries and connecting with resources that work with that population. When it comes down to it's just taking that step.
And being, you know, just willing to be more aware of the number of people in Minnesota and really across the nation who, you know, are in this category. And I think we all know that when people have, you know, do something wrong and they have to serve time for that, that we consider that to be their punishment. Not the punishment should not be that you re-enter society and cannot find gainful employment. So that's kind of the way I look.
Thank you. Well said. Thank you. So still just employers, again, another question for you. Of course, you have, you know, an existing workforce. You're tapping into and recruiting new workers from different groups, including the second chance workforce. How do you build an inclusive culture among your current employees and support, you know, the second chance workforce that you're hiring as well? How do you make sure that there's a balance, that one doesn't feel like they're being overlooked, and, you know, just so your workforce can be inclusive altogether?
So we just don't talk about it, you know, kind of. So it's because I don't think it'd be right for somebody that's coming into Horizon that all of a sudden we broadcast, you know, what and probably not legally, that we broadcast what somebody's record may be. So typically, the only time people find out is if somebody starts talking about that they've been locked up. And vast majority of cases, well, pretty much all cases, people don't, I don't hear complaints or anything from our current workforce. So, and like some of our workforce already has some records that we weren't aware of, so.
This is Tracy Tapney again, and I would just add to what's already been said is I also would not necessarily, make a company announcement about what anyone's background is, regardless of what their circumstances might be. But what I find with our own company is that, over time, people, they get to know each other and they share. So I think, people that have done things in the past, some information about that is pretty widely known. But much like any kind of diversity in the workplace, many people that work in the manufacturing industry know that this is predominantly a world, manufacturing has been built around white males in the industry, and it's still predominantly a white male industry. So we have been working a lot towards all kinds of differences, not just, people that have formerly been incarcerated, but including women in the workforce, people that identify differently than others. And, we do try to not so much talk about that, but to, when conversations are needed, be willing to tackle those difficult conversations with people, and not just ignore the fact that there are differences among people in the workplace. And, by addressing it and talking about it, and making sure that everybody understands what we're trying to do is make an inclusive workforce here at Wyoming Machine, get the people that we need to run our business. And that's going to include people that maybe look different or are different than they were traditionally. And that's okay. So I wouldn't shy away necessarily from talking and tackling the conversations that need to be had. But likewise, I would not make a public announcement about someone's background.
So let me kind of piggyback on that. So yeah, it's, you're, as the employers, you're not recommending that someone with the background shout it from the rooftops. As you mentioned, through conversations between employees, sometimes that information will be made known. And for those current employees that don't have backgrounds, might feel a certain way of all of a sudden there are new workers, and through conversations, these workers are having, they have criminal backgrounds. And so it's possible that it might create a division between your employees that don't have backgrounds, your employees that do. And so for an employer that wants to tap into the second chance workforce, and they're thinking this might be a possibility, this might be something, unfortunately, that can happen, how do you, as the employer, what do you do as the employer to kind of stop that before that division is created? Because like I said, it's not always shouting from the rooftops. It could be just through word of mouth and just general conversation. All of a sudden you have two groups forming.
So as a possibility, just spitballing here, because again, a lot of our workforce is, we've been hiring people that have had records for years before there's even an initiative for it. But maybe if you have an employee group that maybe it's supervisors or foremans or whatever that can kind of speak for the group as a whole, maybe then you sit down with your group and you go over, okay, Horizon Roofing or Wyoming Machining or whoever, we're looking at hiring more people. It's a tough workforce to find people. What sort of background would you guys not be feel comfortable with? But within that, I think also too, defining to then educating yourself on what those what somebody's record may call it, and digging into it, because there's typically there's plenty of scenarios that somebody's background may be called. Well, I'll just use one. So like if somebody has sex offender on their record, there can be a very wide range of what that means, and some of it could be very minor or not even something to worry about, so that the employer gets educated on within like a title, is there something within that title that is going to cause disruption in the workforce? Did I make myself kind of clear on that? I know I'm kind of jumping around because I'm spitballing, but.
No, I think you did. Tracy, did you want to add to that?
I would just say that I think that the world we live in right now is different than it was a long time ago. And, like I said, I've been here for more than 25 years working in this industry. And 25 years ago, when you hired people, the average person didn't know anything about the background of their coworkers. Today, the people that work here, as soon as someone new starts, they're looking them up on Facebook. They're looking at what they're doing on Instagram. They're doing other searches, and oftentimes they know what people have done. But what I think about that is that to a certain extent, because people are constantly, they're looking up their neighbors, they're looking up their friends and seeing what they've done. I think people know in their circles a lot more people who have done things that have, caused them to have some type of criminal background. I mean, even things like DUI. I mean, that's a situation. Sometimes people have multiples of those. And years ago, we didn't know everyone that had those. I just think it's become a little bit more normalized than it was in the past because people know people who are already their friends. They're their neighbors. They go to the same schools together. And, it just, I think, helps normalize that to a certain degree. I have not ever had an experience here in all these years where an employee complained to me or came to me and raised concern about the background of someone else that worked here. I have not had that.
Great, thank you. So the next question is for Russ. We did not forget about you. So Russ, representing, our second chance workforce, did you feel you were treated differently during your job search process because of your background? What barriers have you experienced? What difficulties did you face when first engaging with employers, and how did you deal with those barriers?
Yeah, I did have barriers that I needed to get work through. I'm just going to put it out there. Kurt had mentioned that sex offenders. I'm a sex offender myself. Coming out of prison, trying to find a job. When you have that, when they ask you that question, do you have a felony? What is your felony? And I had to tell them that I was a sex offender. My application was pushed to the side because they said that we do not hire sex offenders. So this is why I had to look at the job market as a whole and find a career that I could do that didn't involve direct contact with everyday people. Sales, they don't want you in sales. If you're in contact with customers, they feel that you're gonna violate or do something that isn't right in their eyes. So that's why I chose to become a mechanic. Yes, I do have contact with customers, but there's a natural barrier there because I'm in a shop working on their vehicle and the front office is dealing with the customer directly. So that was one of the things that I had to do to get through that barrier. And then when I did get hired on here, I was still on parole. So I had to do, for me to get hired here, it took me 6 months from the time I put my application in until the day I started. I don't know if it's just because I was the first person that they hired with that was still on parole and had a sex offense. I don't know what the other employers out there, how their processes go, but it was a long, drawn out process. But for every question or everything that they wanted, I was able to go and get. whether it be a letter from my parole officer, a letter from a mentor, or a letter from a reentry program. I was able to go out and get it as a reference to who I was as an individual, not to who my crime was. You got any other questions out there that are concerning or?
No, no, thank you very much, Russ. So just from my understanding from what you said, as someone with the background, there was just some extra steps that you needed to take to, have an employer look at you and say, yes, you would be, we'll take a chance on you. We'll hire you. We'll see, it was having them look at you as a person, and not your criminal background, what you did in the past, but how you could be, an added value to their company as an employee.
Correct.
And I believe that, all workers, all potential employees, the goal is to let the employer know, this is how I can add value to your company as an employee. I think with someone with a criminal background, there's just those few extra steps, such as, getting the recommendations, from your parole officer you had mentioned. So, I would say that that's, in a sense, how, someone with a criminal background has to approach job searching a little bit differently than someone that doesn't. But no, thank you. Thank you very much. All right, so the next question is for Jeremiah and Jacqueline. As I mentioned earlier, change is coming, with other industries outside of construction, outside of manufacturing, becoming more open to recruiting second chance talent. So as organizations that work with employers, that reach out to employers, that are trying to convince employers to hire individuals from this population, what have you observed? Are you seeing an increase in interest from industries outside and employers outside of construction and manufacturing?
Jacqueline, if you wanted to start, that's fine, or I could take.
Go ahead, Jeremiah. Go ahead. Thank you.
Definitely. I have definitely seen an interest outside of the manufacturing world and the construction industry as well. Those are great jobs. Those jobs offer competitive wages. But I do think, with the pandemic, that it has created some opportunities for this particular untapped workforce. One of the stories that I could share with you all is a young lady that I am continuing to work with that is looking to get back into the banking industry. She was recently released from prison. She had a number of years in the banking industry and had a financial crime that was committed. So because of that crime, it was hard for her to even get an interview. She actually had a bank that took the opportunity to interview this young lady. But when the background issue came up, it created a situation where, obviously she was shut down. Well, she, I don't want to say push back. Well, she provided them the resource of the bonding information and said, there is a resource, this is not the reason I should be hired, but there is a resource available that will protect you as an employer against any theft-related charges. So the bank actually reached out to me. We've had the conversation, and it is an ongoing conversation. And I can't mention the bank's name yet because the young lady isn't hired, but it actually has created a conversation. And I think this is going to create ongoing conversations with different areas of employment. So, we are definitely seeing an influx of new jobs. And if we can tap into a financial institution that is looking to rehire individuals, I think this is going to be a great opportunity. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I just wanted to really focus on the fact that we are starting new conversations, one, based on the pandemic, and two, based on some of the resources that are available, for these employers and giving these individuals a chance to explain their vast experiences. So
thank you.
I agree, Jeremiah. There's been a lot of conversation. So you can see processes and procedures are starting to be challenged. And that's within the hiring practices. So industries are changing for sure. But, and we just had an example of healthcare reaching out. We've had, housing and residential support reach out. So we can start to see things lighten up to be more inclusive in hiring practices. But what I've been most inspired by is that human resources and executive leadership are really looking at the hiring practices, and they're starting to get really creative in the ways of having more flexibility to really look at the individual. And just as we heard, is that reform and rehabilitation happens in a different space. It doesn't have to happen out in that reentry world. So it's really saying, how do we validate those references? How do we validate and connect to bring that person in to support them differently and support them better? So I think it's really exciting to be a part of that initiative within Workforce, where we're able to see change happening and really inspire each other to continue to address that. So it is definitely a recruiting value for all industries. And I think we learned some best practices from manufacturing and from construction. And it's giving us a reason as a whole workforce development entity to say, how do we make those changes too? And how can we learn from those best practices? So just like Jeremiah said, some industries that typically have never called or reached out for before, they are. And that's a really exciting and inspiring time.
Great. So I'm assuming from your answers from both of you, it's going to be nothing but, more employers from more industries, more opportunities for second chance workforce to get into jobs that, before were totally closed off to them. I mean, Jeremiah, you had mentioned the finance, and the young lady that you're working with has a offense that's related to finance. To have a bank considering her for employment is wonderful. And then for you, Jacqueline, with healthcare, that's I can, and I could be wrong, I could see that as one of the last industries to really let go of some of those hesitations, because you're dealing with vulnerable either adults or children. And so, there's a lot of liability on there to even hear about healthcare employers saying, okay, we're willing to look at individuals with backgrounds for employment. As I mentioned before, it's the second chance workforce is defined from first time to repeat. And so I think in the past, everything was lumped into one box. Everyone was lumped into one box. It didn't matter if you did something one time 50 years ago, or you did something multiple times just 5 years ago. You were all the same. You were all put into the same box. And so you had those same barriers. So it's good to see that employers are starting to open up, because it also gives us, as Workforce Strategy consultants, the opportunity to also kind of be an advocate for second chance workforce as well, and saying, hey, this is a talent pool that we would recommend that you at the very least, look into and consider for talent for your workforce. So that is great. Thank you.
And
Yes, go ahead.
Could I just add something? And I don't want to take this, too far to the left and get us off track here. But when you think about those conversations, I think, the conversations that need to be had are, how are you going to support these individuals, especially when you are entering into a new area of employment? And I think that's one area that's not addressed, is that we can help these individuals find work, and these individuals can find work in these new industries. But if they're not supported, we're repeating this process over and over again, because they're going to lose their job. So I think the issue is not necessarily finding employment. The bigger issue is retainment of employment. So if we can get these individuals supported by their employers, where they're not being criticized at work, or feeling like they are put under a microscope at work, and actually are supported and understand the conditions of release, that creates a situation where we're providing long-term career opportunities instead of just jobs. So I think that is an issue that needs to be addressed. And that's something that, when I said we have these conversations with employers, those are things that we talk about, so they understand best practices in supporting these individuals when offering these opportunities.
So two things that wasn't too far to the left. That was perfect, Jeremiah. But no, I do agree that there needs to be support from the employer. And then I think with organizations like Twin Cities Rise, like New Leaf, like some of the other that I mentioned earlier in the presentation, also getting the support too, and engaging with that employer to make sure that, it's not just a job for that individual, it's a career. We always are encouraging, there's a difference between a job and a career. We want people to have careers somewhere where they can see themselves long term. They could be a part of the workforce. They can be inclusive to the workforce. They can see themselves grow within that industry, especially if it's an industry that they like. So yeah, it definitely takes support from the employers. And I believe as well, equally support from organizations such as yours, because what you guys do is valuable, especially for getting second chance workers back into, or first time into the workforce. So definitely. Before we move on, any additions to this question for Jacqueline or Jeremiah? Okay. So for the employers, we're back to the employers. So currently we have what they consider a tight labor market, or like what I'd like to call a candidate or job seeker driven market. And that's where there are more opportunities than there are talent. What strategies as an employer have been successful with attracting and retaining second chance workforce? Because of this tight labor market, you have to look into different, talent pools, where it be second chance, or, women, or the BIPOC communities, or, youth, or even, older workers. What strategies have been successful? And also, in your opinion, what strategies would you recommend employers new to this space implement to create successful long-term, job matches? Any specific stories? I think we talked a little bit about this already, but if you can, continue and elaborate on that, what have been those strategies that have worked for you? What do you recommend for employers?
We're still going in same order. I would say, me speaking on this, I don't feel like I can say I have some magical wand to figure it out, because we're trying to figure it out, all the different avenues. Going to schools, going to veterans groups, going to knowing people in Indeed, speaking in the prison. What we did pre-COVID was we started a community outreach training. So what that was is Horizon Roofing has 2 training centers, one in Way Park, one in New Hope now, and we bring in people from the community and train them for 5 days for free, and then including forklift certification. And at the end of the 5 days, then we hope to pick the best of the best. And that has been put on pause, during the past 2 years with COVID. Typically the people that were having come in are from North Minneapolis or St. Paul, like Frogtown area, things like that, to reach out to people that just maybe don't know the next step on how to find a good job, good career. So hopefully somebody else has some magical advice.
I think that first off, I would start by saying, I think it's important to remember that some of what employers offer to try to attract and retain employees in this labor market they're going to be the same no matter what you're doing for it or who the candidate is. And so to me, flexibility is a huge part of what we're trying to do here at Wyoming Machine, regardless of who we're trying to bring in. So we're trying to attract people from different areas, different places, different backgrounds, because we need those people here, and different kinds of people need different flexibility in their work life. So, that might mean sometimes offering a part-time schedule to somebody, even if you've never done that before. In manufacturing, we've always had really rigid start and end times for people, because that's just the way the industry worked. Now I offer flexible schedules. I might say these are kind of the standard schedules that people are working, but I'm willing to be a little bit flexible with you if transportation's an issue, or you have childcare as an issue, or whatever those situations might be. I think that, people that have been involved in the criminal justice system, when they come out, sometimes they have things that they need to do. And because of the way the system works, sometimes those things happen during the workday. For example, you might have to go to some kind of class that's a requirement. You have to complete in a certain amount of time, and it's at this location at this time of day, and there's no way to get around it. I have adjusted people's hours sometimes while they're having to do something like that so that they can meet their requirements for taking classes or going to meetings while still maintaining 40 hours a week of work by just making some schedule adjustments. So I think flexibility really is the name of the game, no matter who you're trying to work with, and just having understanding that there's requirements out there that have to be met.
All right, thank you. So earlier in the presentation, I had there was a slide that talked a little bit about myths and biases. We don't know what we don't know. How might we as workforce strategy consultants or just organizations that are supporting people re-entering the workforce from the second chance workforce, how might we approach the topic of hiring individuals from this population to hiring managers or HR who have these biases, who think, once a criminal, always a criminal. I am adamant, I don't want to hire anyone from this group. Although just from the conversations that we've had so far, there's been some success with both Wyoming and Horizon Roofing hiring from this population. Russ is doing great at his job. Jacqueline and Jeremiah had mentioned, other industries are slowly starting to become more relaxed and look at this population. But, the truth is we still have some hiring managers and HR that are holding on to those biases. How, and this is actually for everyone, the entire, everyone on the panel, how do we approach this topic? How do we get to those individuals that have those biases and say, hey, because we're in a tight labor market, you might want to, reconsider looking at this population for potential employment.
So we'll mix up this order at some point, right? So what I'd like to see as an employer, because we don't know what we don't know. And so when it comes to certain definitions and the different levels of things that could entail, it'd be nice to actually have clarity to that. I think everybody's completely swamped in trying to do two people's jobs. So to actually learn all that is difficult. One thought I have is when people are applying, if we are going to find something on their record, okay, what does that actually mean instead of everything being bulked together? What does it actually mean? Having actual facts of like, what's the percentage of reoffenders because the amount of people that actually commit some sort of crime and then are reoffenders, I forget who I was meeting with, but vast majority of crimes of reoffenders are very, very, very small. And it's just almost having like not a cheat sheet, but almost part of, I don't know if it'd be part of the resume, but knowing that in advance would be nice, because we do get plenty of applications, and some of the applications we may flip through fairly quickly because of just something that caught our attention. And this would not only be good for right now, hopefully the labor market improves and we can find employees easier, but just in the future of having some sort of cheat sheet will be helpful not only for the employer, but also for the person that's going to be interviewing, and it'd be a lot more fair. So.
Anyone else?
One thing that I'm thinking about related to this is, I saw I think a question popped up in the chat, and I'm not sure that I captured the entire thing because it was only on the screen for a moment, but someone indicating that females in their workforce sometimes express that they're afraid to have people with, backgrounds, or they're afraid to work with them. And, I think when things like that come up, first off, I think it's important for people to really understand, kind of along with facts, what is there actually to be afraid of? I mean, many of the individuals in the criminal justice system here in Minnesota, and I think in a lot of places, are there because of drug-related activity. You know, sometimes it's substance abuse that gets them into some kind of situation, and if their substance abuse situation has been dealt with, you know, I'm not really sure what there is to be afraid of. And I don't say that lightly, but I have not had that come up in my workplace. And so I think understanding what really would be the risks that people might face in the workplace, and being honest about that. And if someone does say that they are afraid, you know, as an employer, maybe there's a way to educate people on what are the strategies that you can use to address someone's fear, because the person expressing the fear is probably the area where we need to focus on addressing how can we alleviate that fear for you? Because there's really nothing the person who has gotten a job, you know, in a place who has some kind of background can do to address the fear for the person. That's something that, you know, from a human resources standpoint, you have to, I think, address that with the person who's feeling fear and come up with strategies for how to address that with them, you know, to alleviate any concern that they might have. So I don't know if that's helpful.
It was. Jacqueline or Jeremiah?
I was just gonna say, Kurt, you had mentioned a cheat sheet. I kind of hesitate, or I almost cringe at that, simply because when you say a cheat sheet, that can also set up a chance for blanket policies, blanket hiring policies. So if you say you don't look at individuals that have predatory offenses, but then, you know, your cheat sheet says, you know, we're not going to hire someone that has a predatory offense, but then you have someone that has like a terroristic threats charge or a violation of a court order. You know, if there was an order, and they can be viewed as a predatory offender. So it creates a situation where you might, you know, really judge somebody without getting to know that individual. So saying having a cheat sheet, just that, I don't know. I just don't necessarily feel good about having a cheat sheet. One of the recommendations that I have would be to, you know, meet with that individual if you have further questions, possibly connect directly with the DOC or connect with community corrections where you're having conversations with the agents. The agents are there to really support these individuals finding work. Sometimes it always doesn't work that way, but most agents are there to help these individuals find work. So if they are on parole or probation, maybe connect with that agent to find out if there's some specific areas of release, specific conditions of release. I've seen that question come up about travel restrictions. That agent will have that information. There are always specific specific conditions of release that is typically public information. So connecting with that agent and finding out what their conditions of release are, but just having like a cheat sheet and saying, we're not going to hire because you have this offense or you have that offense, could really take you out of the running for some possible really good candidates. And we have one on the line. You know, Russ, if he was put under that cheat sheet, wouldn't have had that opportunity for that job that he has now. And it seems like, you know, if he's been there since 2016, he must be a hell of an employee. So, you know, I would not want to put those blanket hiring statements out in that fashion. So maybe just taking a chance to, talk to that individual. And then if you have further questions, maybe involve some of those individuals that are their support system, being that agent or that community organization, maybe that made that referral to you. So just to get a few more nuggets of information, if that makes sense.
Well, when I say cheat sheet, that may be a term.
I'm sorry. I don't want to interrupt. This is definitely a good conversation. I know that we're at the end of the webinar, so I definitely want to continue this in our Unplugged. So that'll be the first thing we do. But yeah, just for the sake of time, let's close out this presentation, and then, like I said, we'll continue the conversation in the Unplugged. So as you can see, these are some of the resources for employers who have additional questions or hesitations when it comes to recruiting, second chance talent, we'll be sending out these resources and resources that were mentioned in the chat box, along with the survey for today's webinar. And with that, I will hand it over to Della Ludwig, who will talk about next month's topic.
Excellent. So next month, we're going to be talking with youth and the youth in the community. So did you know only 53.5% of Minnesota's 16 to 19-year-olds participate in the labor force? So join us May 4th to learn about strategies and developing strong connections with today's youth that will strengthen your talent pipeline for years to come. Hear from a panel of employers and CTE or career and technical education coordinators that are subject matter experts with promising practices for developing successful training opportunities for youth. So we'll see you on May 4th, but if you want to stay tuned.
Yeah, so with that, I want to say thank you once again to the panelists. Hopefully everyone could stay on, the panelists can stay on for the Unplugged session that'll be immediately after this. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to the Workforce Strategy Consultants, my counterparts. This has been a very good, robust discussion. I do apologize for cutting both Kurt and Jeremiah off. I do want to continue the conversation about the cheat sheet in our Unplugged. With that, we're going to take a 1-minute break and then we'll continue that discussion. Please stay on to hear more from our panelists and our Workforce Strategy Consultants. So with that, thank you once again for those who can't stay on, and for those that do, please join us back here in a minute.